old friend RJ City, and I know you're growing tired and weary of this mediocre society, so I think it's time for bed. I've decided to read you a bedtime story tonight, and it is called Pickles Over Pittsburgh, the sequel to Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. I'm sure you've seen the movie. It's just a lot of people getting hit with a lot of food. That's pretty much what we're going to have in store here, too. Written and colored by Judy Barrett, drawn by Ron Barrett. Ron was a black and white kind of guy. He would draw the pictures and she would color them in. And that's why they're still in love. Nevertheless, let us begin with the sequel known as Pickles Over Pittsburgh. It's kind of a moons over Miami kind of vibe. Listen, I have no idea what happened in the first one, so just bear with me. We all miss Grandpa an awful lot. His Saturday morning pancakes, his mostly funny jokes, and especially his wonderful bedtime stories. Tomorrow would be Thursday, and he'd be home. Who knows where he was? We could hardly wait to hear where he had been and what he had done. Good, at least we'll get some answers. To pass the time, we helped Mom make spaghetti and meatballs for dinner. Henry made the largest meatballs we've ever seen. They barely fit into the pot. Mom thanked us for helping, but asked that the meatballs be much smaller next time. Look at them. Look at these rowdy kids throwing meatballs. This guy, he's out of his mind. Let's continue. After we finished eating, Henry and I cleaned up the table so we could help bake a special welcome home cake for Grandpa. You get cakes for like birthdays, anniversaries, weddings, not for just coming home. It was chocolate with strawberry icing and made in the shape of Grandpa's face. That's terrifying. We licked as much of the batter off the spoons as we possibly could. Yes. Come on, children. Let's all lick Grandpa. Dear Lord. What a bizarre family, and it gets weirder. I took Grandpa's postcard up to my room and put it on the little table beside my bed. I kept staring at it and wondering. The lamplight made a bright photograph of a wonderful place that seemed somehow familiar. I said goodnight to it and drifted off into my dream. So now, see, this is her sleeping, everything's in black and white, and then they're coloring it in. Surrounded by milky blue skies, with Henry as my co-pilot, we carefully steer our plane through the large puffs of mist. Soon we find ourselves soaring over an island, a very lumpy island. From the air, it looks like a gigantic feast. Immense vegetables, salads, and desserts lie beneath us. The mountains look like huge loaves of bread. Looks like a real food island. You know, which is almost like going to a buffet in Atlantic City. It's the same kind of grotesque vibe. We decided to take a closer look and prepare ourselves for a bumpy landing, avoiding some broccoli and narrowly missing a tremendous hamburger on an oversized bun. We come down and taxi on what appears to be giant strips of crisp bacon. So if you're not figuring it out, everything here is made of food, right? Look, they're going to land on bacon. Isn't that preposterous? Henry and I step down from the plane and look around in awe. Before us lies a strange but wonderful landscape. We are surrounded by larger-than-life vegetables. Nearby is a lake that smells like breakfast. That would be dear old lake breakfast. Bordered by leafy jungles of lettuce that resembled tossed salad. And I am not going to comment on that because I know your parents are watching. See, look at this. This frog's got an egg on his head. Isn't that hilarious? There is food everywhere, and we've pretty much exhausted the premise. We try to keep our balance as we walk around top of a gigantic bagel and past a forest of towering carrots. One is pierced by a tunnel large enough for a car to drive through. Look at that. Bagels and carrots. That's a disgusting mixture. You have carrot cake. You can't have a carrot bagel. It'd be gross. Off in the distance, we see popcorn snowing down onto the peaks of enormous rolls. Way up above our heads, high up in the trees that look like broccoli, chubby birds are nesting in huge shredded wheat biscuits. So not everything is made out of food. The birds obviously are not edible unless you consider birds food. I mean, I wouldn't eat, a robin. But if it was a chicken, we're getting very, very existential. Ahead of us, at the end of a long road, lies what looks like an abandoned town. Eager to know where we are, we start walking towards it. Sweet-smelling rain begins to fall. It collects in hundreds of open containers that are lined up in a field beside the road. Lots of orange puddles are everywhere. I'll get that next time. Everywhere. Orange juice. It's raining orange juice. Is there pulp? Is there no pulp? Is it concentrated? Nobody's sure, but they're drinking it up. Why would they need to bottle them and sell them? They just wait till it rains. Interesting question about the economy of this island. All of a sudden, we find ourselves standing in the shadow of a giant tuna fish sandwich with much stink, being delicately airlifted by helicopter. In the distance, another helicopter races off with a jumbo pickle in tow. You see that? How disgusting. How grotesque. I'm not a tuna man myself. Fly a mackerel. When we reach what is left of the town, we see the remnants of a sign welcoming us to a place called Chew and Swallow. Somehow, I know I've heard that name somewhere before. So the town's name is Chew and Swallow. On the island of what? Of what state? Of what province? Of what country? Nobody knows. Get me a map. We walk through the entire town in amazement. So there's the chicken. Maybe they do eat birds here. Figure that out. And you would think the ice cream would have melted by now, but I guess this is a fantasy. Up ahead, lots of workers wearing helmets and dressed in matching uniforms are loading huge potatoes onto a truck. That would be disgusting. All this construction, all this soot and grimy construction worker hands getting all over your potato. The other trucks sag under the weight of immense artichokes, enormous eggplants, and massive peas and carrots. Foot-long veal cutlets are stacked up to be packed for shipping. Yeah, I've always wanted my veal to be bigger. You know, there it is there. That's delightful. To the east, the weather is changing and we can see sandwiches raining down. As soon as they land, they are piled up neatly, ready for shipment on a freighter anchored down by the shore. Look, you know, it's a fantasy world, but they're incredibly industrious. Whether this is a dream or not, they seem to know how to make the most of their resources. Large reservoirs of milk and cream flow into extra large containers which are lined up to be loaded onto a ship. Printed on the sides of the trucks are the words, Falling Food Company, large food for large and small countries free. So, you know, they're kind of lucky in this sense, this town. All these resources, they don't really have to pay for them. They just sell them. Sounds kind of like a scam. I don't want to sound like I'm too socialist here, but I think if the food's literally falling from the sky, things should be available for everyone to eat. One of the workers tells us that Chew and Swallow used to be a very ordinary little town, except that instead of weather, food rained down from the sky for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now, this would be disgusting. Remember how early it rained orange juice? Imagine you're wet with orange juice, and now you got a pea soup falling on you. Not a good combination. Back then, he says, by some quirk of nature, the falling food grew larger and larger. Storms of gigantic food threatened normal life. So the people took their belongings and sailed away to a new land on rafts made of huge slices of stale bread. Now, if you've ever used sliced bread that's stale, you know it's very incredibly durable. Oh, look at this. We're getting very patriotic here. They returned years later to see what had happened to Chew and Swallow. They discovered an endless food supply and decided to create the Falling Food Company. Now, children, this is a parody of Washington crossing the Delaware. I'm sure you're all familiar from your history books. Also, I'd like to point out, why is there a dolphin here? Are we eating dolphins in this sick, depraved, forever hungry town? Now, daily shipments are made to all parts of the world, from the smallest town to the largest cities. As soon as the food lands, it's wrapped, boxed, bottled, or packaged, and sent out to people who need it. See, there's the food going all over the world. I guess the dolphins are only eaten domestically. I'm not too crazy about the logistics, even with poverty and drought throughout the world. That's why no one in the world is ever hungry. Have you noticed that? No one in the world has a food shortage or lacking in resources. There's always enough food for everyone. This is a fantasy. Look at this fellow with a packet of ketchup. Who's better than him? Because that's all you want. That's probably 3 months worth of ketchup. You just got to squeeze it out of that large. Henry and I think this is a great idea. We wish we could stay and work here, but I don't think they hire kids. That would be, this labor laws. It's getting late and we hate to leave, but we really have to be heading home. Mom's expecting us for dinner. The workers give us a 2-foot wide chocolate chip cookie, which we carry back to the plane. It just barely fits through the door. You wonder, they're flying up like a private jet. You would think a giant, 2-foot chocolate cookie would alter the weight distribution. surprised they're allowed to fly. We buckle up, I rev the engine, and we start rolling down the bacon runway. As everyone waves goodbye, we can see dinner approaching from the west. Spaghetti and meatballs, I think. As we gain altitude, Chew and Swallow slowly vanishes into the distance. Look at these guys hanging out on some corn. Don't mind us, we're just copping it up. My alarm clock woke me with a jolt. It was finally Thursday, and I wanted to get to school fast. The sooner I got there, the sooner I get home, and the sooner I'd see Grandpa. See, she had that great dream, but it was all for naught. And the colors were only in her dreams, which tells you a lot about life as you get older. And the mundane, monochromatic. When we got home, we ran as fast as we could into Grandpa's waiting arms. I brought back something for you, said Grandpa, and he gave each of us a very large box containing a chocolate chip cookie he had gotten on this trip. They were the biggest we had ever seen, almost 2 feet wide, which is an exaggeration, even based on her dream. Mom made Grandpa's favorite dinner, chicken and dumplings, I'll get it, and we surprised him with our special welcome home cake. He chose the slice with the mustache. So that's creepy. This guy, this freak, there's a cake in the shape of his face. He decides to eat his own mustache. This is a little weird. Quite a vanity project, I must say. By the time the dinner was done, it was late and Grandpa was tired. When he was all tucked in bed, we knocked on his door to give him an extra goodnight kiss. Then I told Grandpa the most wonderful tall-tale bedtime story he'd ever heard. It began, surrounded by milky blue skies and with Henry as my co-pilot. Grandpa stayed awake till the very end. Then he looked up at us with a very funny glint in his eye and said, "Wait till I show you the pictures I took on my trip." And then he drifted off into his own wonderful dreams. Now, what could that mean? He seems to know exactly what's going. Is that the end of the book? Well, that's weird. See, obviously the grandfather knows something's up, and I feel like he's influenced these kids. I don't know if it's some kind of mind control. I don't know if he slipped something in their cake, but he's messing with their heads. And they think they're having these wonderful, beautiful dreams, but he's all in control of them because he's a weirdo who eats his own mustache on a cake. That was Pickles Over Pittsburgh, the sequel to Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. And to be quite honest with you, I've lost my appetite. Oh yeah, let's sing the bedtime lullaby. Two, three, four. Good night.
Guests of the RJ City Show, subscribe to his channel, follow him on social media, and buy his t-shirts at prowrestlingtees.com/RJ City.